And now to the Talladega Superspeedway, where there was a powerful show of support for Bubba Wallace today. NASCAR's only full-time black driver was escorted in his car by fellow drivers and crew members to the front of the grid after a noose was found in Wallace's garage yesterday. The incident comes after NASCAR banned the Confederate flag from its events, prompting some protests and acts of defiance. We're going to speak with a NASCAR racing team owner in just a moment, but first let's go to ABC's Victor Oquendo with the latest.
Tonight at Talladega Superspeedway, an incredible show of solidarity with driver Bubba Wallace before the race. Drivers and pit crews from every team marching along with Wallace's number 43 car. The powerful moment necessary after a noose was found by a team member hanging inside Wallace's garage stall at the track on Sunday. Wallace, the circuit's only full-time black driver, emerging overcome, embracing NASCAR legend and team owner Richard Petty, who called the incident a filthy act. The drivers then bowing their heads in prayer.
And as we stand together against racism, by your Holy Spirit, guide us to true liberty and justice for all.
Team officials say the noose was found by a member of Wallace's team who immediately reported it. The FBI and the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division now investigating along with NASCAR.
You want to make sure that Bubba is safe, and we have stepped up security.
Wallace, undaunted, writing, "As my mother told me today, they are just trying to scare you. This will not break me. I will not give in, nor will I back down." The hate-fueled attack coming about 2 weeks after the Confederate flag was banned from all NASCAR events.
There's no good that comes with that flag, and that's the message we're kind of trying to get across.
That charge for change boldly led by Wallace, who emblazoned his car with the Black Lives Matter hashtag. Sunday's race was postponed due to bad weather. 5,000 fans were welcome. The Confederate flag was not, but plenty of them outside, and even one flying above, those words reading "Defund NASCAR." Tonight, these words on the infield: "I stand with Bubba."
And Victor joins us now. Victor, NASCAR's officials are looking into who placed this noose in that stall. Where does that investigation stand right now?
Diane, NASCAR officials have said that there are surveillance cameras inside of that garage, and we also know only a limited amount of people would have had that kind of access, fewer than normal because of the coronavirus. NASCAR's president says he wants the people responsible banned for life. And one more note, whether or not they face federal charges, the Department of Justice saying there's no place for this kind of action. Diane?
Victor Oquendo from the Homestead Miami Speedway. Our thanks to you, Victor. For more on how NASCAR is grappling with these issues, let's bring in Brad Daugherty, the owner of JTG Daugherty Racing. He's also an ESPN analyst and a former NBA player. Brad, thanks for being on with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So we've seen some strong messages of support for Bubba Wallace today. How do you think this incident is affecting the racing community in general?
Well, Diane, I think overall what it does is it gives the opportunity for us all to take a glimpse and kind of learn a little bit more about the little dark underbelly of racism. You know, I grew up in a small town in western North Carolina, and the majority of my friends growing up in this little small town were Caucasian people, were white. And so most of my best friends in this world are white. And when we talk about race, I'm always trying to talk to them about the subtle things in racism that they just don't quite get. And as we've gotten into the last couple of months with all of the activism and people being really voicing their opinions and platforms, you know, people still are asking questions. What does racism really look like? We kind of know what we saw a few weeks ago in Minnesota, but what are the other things? What are the other symbols of racism? And for someone to get to see this or to hear this today after everything that's going on in our society, I think it's a great wake-up call for all of us to see that these things still exist, even though we talk about them and they're abhorrent and we're trying to get rid of them and push them aside. There's still always that element.
A wake-up call is such a great way of putting it. And you've been involved with racing for decades. How do you think the sport has changed over time in terms of its attitude toward race? What does this moment mean for the sport? Do you see that wake-up call in the world of racing?
Yeah, I think it's been a monumental shift. What has happened in NASCAR over the last couple of weeks with, you know, the president of NASCAR, Steve Phelps, stepping up and basically drawing a line in the sand, something that back in 2015 we talked about. The then chairman, Brian France, was very passionate about removing the Confederate flag from events and venues, and there was some talk and there was some theory behind it, and there was some efforts to try and do that, but it just kind of went by the wayside with the everyday deals of doing big business. And now we're seeing a movement that is not going away, first of all, and if you're not a part of this movement, you're going to be left in the wake. And NASCAR has taken a huge stance on changing a lot of things, the perception of NASCAR over the last 5 decades, and how people view the sport, what they think of the sport. This is unprecedented, and this is huge. And NASCAR continues to make statements and react in a manner that I'm proud to be a member of NASCAR at this point.
And NASCAR is not the only league asking itself these kinds of tough questions. I know you played in the NBA. You've covered basketball for many years as well. Some players there are thinking of foregoing the rest of the season, both out of concerns over health, but some are now saying also over issues of race in this country. What's your advice to those players?
What we see today with the young athletes, men and women, they have tremendous platforms. They have the largest platforms in the world to get messages out, to be positive and change. And so I'm asking all these young men and young women to be responsible, to offer some solutions. Don't just get caught up in a movement without actually having some concrete foundational solutions that you can offer people in order to help. Everyone at this point in time is yelling and screaming and doing all kinds of things, and that's great. We all should have our voices be heard. But I'm the type of person, I'm starting to look for what's the change? How do we change, hundreds of years of history and hundreds of years of oppression and those types of things.
And Brad, so much of what you're talking about is communication, and I do want to go back to that. I know you're partnering with P&G to help educate people about racial inequality in the U.S. How do you go about having these sometimes uncomfortable conversations, and how do you open up that kind of meaningful dialogue that you're describing with a topic that so many people are afraid to even touch?
Yeah. That's the biggest problem in our world today, or in our society today. Just having a good conversation with a Caucasian buddy of mine I grew up with. We were just talking about this 30 minutes ago. The reality of it is that we live in such a politically correct society. We can't have conversations about these things, and it's sad. We can talk about race, and we will talk about race until the cows come home. But until I can have a conversation on how I see things and not be pushed into a politically correct corner, and when we can have discussions as Black or African American males about our role in our communities and our responsibilities and those types of things, it'll never go away. So we have to be able to push the left side of the politics off the table, the right side of the politics off the table, sit down as people and cultivate some ideas and topics and speak to one another from the heart respectfully. Political correctness has wiped that off the boards, and it's going to be difficult because without communication, you don't get much. So going to the website I spoke of earlier at pg.com/Take on Race. There's some tools there, some interesting tools, interesting educational opportunities. We need more of that. And at the end of the day, we need forums. We need to sit down and have these very deep conversations about who we are, where we're going, and how we get there together.
Well, we certainly appreciate everything that you're doing to open up those conversations. And Brad, we very much appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation with us today. I appreciate it. Thank you.